who gave them the votes sitting on the whole day because they cannot afford these sanitary towels. I also want them to imagine their daughters. I heard Senator Boni Halwale in the past saying he has so many daughters, he has so many wives, and so therefore he understands the issues of women. I would like for Senator Boni Halwale to imagine all his daughters and all his wives digging holes every single month, sitting on them so that they can be able to bleed in peace because they cannot afford these sanitary towels. Or I want them to imagine, for instance, that the lastborn, who does not have a heavy flow, can use a sanitary towel, pass it over to one of the wives because the wife has a heavy flow, and use the same sanitary, because that is the reality that we have as Kenyans. This is a real issue. It's a shadow pandemic that we seriously need to look into, and that is why I am moving this motion, so that we can be able, for once, to discuss candidly and openly and debate on matters that directly affect those who have elected us to this house, so that we can come up or support the bill that I'm bringing to the house with an understanding that this is a real shadow pandemic. Mr. Speaker, on the issue of access to menstrual products, I am pushing, and it is actually my prayer through the bill that I'm proposing, that we have sanitary pads, free sanitary pads given to all public schools, both primary school and secondary school. Mr. Speaker, that is not the reality that we have right now. Yes, there could be one line in our law that states it should be done, but it is not the reality. So we need to find ways to make it a reality. That is the first thing that I'm pushing. Mr. Speaker, on the issue of menstrual stigma and the misinformation, when I came to the house, I had fellow senators telling me it is not possible. There is no way you can have an accident. For sure, you know when you're having your periods. There was a lot of misinformation around that. Just because you do not see the accidents that we women have when it comes to menstruation does not mean that they don't exist, Mr. Speaker. There's a lot of misinformation that is actually guiding the period shaming. There's a lot of misinformation that is actually even guiding the policies in this country. And the problem that we have had, Mr. Speaker, is that those who are drafting the policies and the laws actually do not understand what it means to bleed continuously without dying for 7 days and having to manage that. And Mr. Speaker, so therefore, in my submissions, I want us to consider that period shaming is a real thing. We had a girl who actually committed suicide because she stained her dress, and the teacher made some comments that actually, you know, devastated her, made her feel so ashamed that she took her own life, Mr. Speaker. So you can imagine the kind of ridicule that I had when I came to the floor of the house. The kind of ridicule that I had when someone stood and said that, Mr. Speaker, this house is a house of dignity, and so therefore I am not befitting at that moment to be in this house because I am on my period. Mr. Speaker, these are the kind of things that our girls are actually going through down in the grassroots. The only difference, Mr. Speaker, is that they probably don't have the platform that I do have to speak out against certain things. The only difference, Mr. Speaker, is perhaps being a Kisii, from Kisii County, and having been brought up by a single father, I probably have developed a thick skin. But Mr. Speaker, it should not be the case. It should not be the case that our girls are being shamed for actually going through a natural process. So the issue on period shaming is a matter that should be taken into account when putting together this policy. There should be repercussions to teachers, to people of authority who actually castigate girls for going through their period, who make funny comments. That is something that we can legislate. If we are able to legislate sexual harassment, sincerely speaking, we can legislate period shaming. Mr. Speaker, I know that I'm running out of time, but I want to tell my fellow senators, those who probably do not support this motion or do not support this bill, I want to tell them, it is a fact, Mr. Speaker. Of all the women senators that are in this house, they all bleed. All of them. They have their periods every month. some even more than 7 days, some heavier than I do, some lighter than I do. They all bleed. It is nothing to be ashamed of. And the first thing is to talk about it, Mr. Speaker, accept it, because we as legislators, if we are the ones castigating people for having periods, Mr. Speaker, then we are never going to deal with the issue of period shaming. And